Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kelly Green Hour. It's been a minute, but the season is back on as the Eagles have hit the fields at the Jefferson Training Complex in South Philadelphia, and we are 16 days away from the our first preseason game in Baltimore, and we are 45 days away from the first regular season game at Lincoln Financial Field against the Washington Commanders. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, what's going on, man? I know you just came back from vacation. How was it?
It was good. It was just, family time, beach time, pool time, enjoying some nice weather. We only had one rainy day, so that was awesome. It still doesn't sound right to call it the Jefferson whatever field, but we'll get used to that, I suppose. But it's so good to have football back, man. That lull was just getting to be too much. The media was getting out of hand, just trying to create stories just to keep themselves out there. I feel like during that lull of the off season, people should just go on vacation for 2 to 3 weeks and just forget about stuff because there's really nothing to report. They're really just trying to stir the pot on things. Just my take on it. Go and enjoy a vacation, enjoy this weather.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the media, especially Philadelphia media tries to make something out of nothing. And as I usually say, if no news is good news in the world of the Philadelphia Eagles in the offseason. Before we jump in the things that have happened leading up to the first couple of days of training camp, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHerrell54. Follow the Eagles Pinpull Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts at Eagles Pinpull Network. And if you're joining us live, let us know your thoughts in the chat. Anything Eagles related, whether that be the Jalen Carter extension, some of the extensions that are going on around the league that will impact the Philadelphia Eagles. Denzel Ward got a big extension. I don't think he's the extension we should be looking at, though. Whatever Christian Gonzalez gets, that's the extension we should be looking at in terms of Quinyon Mitchell. Grant Delpit's extension, we could potentially look at that in terms of Cooper DeJean. Somebody got an extension to Chris Olave got an extension from the Saints. Could look at that in terms of his or Jackson Smith and Jigsa's extension in terms of Devontae Smith. So there's a lot going on as every team in the National Football League is now in camp. So Connor, the one thing that I've noticed about the Eagles and about Jalen Hurts in particular, this dude just seems like he has a weight lifted off his shoulders, and maybe that has a lot to do with AJ Brown on the team. It's not going to be where they have to quote unquote force feed a receiver. It's going to be everybody go out there, do your job, get out, and I'll get you the ball. The first couple of days of camp, Eagles practice a lot of under center, throwing over the middle, a lot of things that a lot of the media and a lot of people are saying Jalen Hurts can't do. Well, I get it. It's only practice. It's not a game, but practice makes perfect. Repetition. And I think it's good to see Jalen Hurts in this offense, doing things that are out of the norm. And, a lot of the defensive players are saying this is going to help them when they go up against the likes of the Rams, the Packers, the Vikings. They're not going to be – they're going to have an idea of what, certain motions are going to lead to, what receivers may be running. And I think that's good. And then on the offensive side of the ball, Jordan Mailata talked about how, like, he said he calls Sean Mannion the evil genius, and he was talking about just some of the concepts and some of the blocking techniques and whatnot. He's like, wow, this is what other teams are doing. It's a lot easier, while Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are good, and Lane Johnson especially, like on being out there on an island, when you don't have to be on an island all the time, it can help you in a game, and it can help, injury wise, it can help you in your career and longevity. So I think that this is going to help the offense big time if they're able to, pick it up and kind of do what they do going into the season.
Yeah, you make a ton of great points. I mean, definitely, like we've already seen some highlights posted on the Philadelphia Eagles X feed of a really nice grab by Darius Cooper, an amazing grab by Dontavian Wicks today, where Jalen Hurts put it where only he knew his guy was going to go up and get it. And then there was a really nice play day one to Devontae Smith that was also shared. All three of those plays over the middle, all three of those, the Devontae Smith one not as much, but the Darius Cooper one and the Dontavian Wicks ones were ones that you knew he was putting it where he knew his guy was going to be able to get that football. And you can tell that he's definitely done some work with some of these guys throughout the off season, and it's definitely paying some dividends. I mean, Jalen Hurts has looked really good. And obviously we don't want to overreact to 2 days of training camp and stuff. But like you said, this is a whole new offense, and just the way the guys are carrying themselves, the energy, the pictures you're seeing, the videos you're seeing, you can tell this is night and day from what it looked like when Kevin Patullo was running the show during training camp last off season. So there's definitely some really good things going on. And like you said, it's not that this offensive line can't function on an island, but it helps to have the pressure alleviated by having more movement, by having Johnny Mund out there, who's been a clear, very important part of the 12 personnel package that they've been rolling out. Him and Dallas Goedert have been essentially the two tight ends who've spent the most time out there on the field from all the report and sense that we get. Which was obviously clear when they brought Johnny Mund in, they knew they were bringing him in for this exact reason, that he was going to be in 12 personnel. He was going to be the main block and tight end. They were going to find ways to get him on the football field. He's going to make this roster. It's clear and obvious. There's nobody else who brings that unique skill set that Johnny Mund does to this team. But the energy, the vibes, they're just feeling really good. And I'm not sitting here saying, here we go 18-0 and overreacting to it. I'm just saying the vibes are different. The feelings are different. And I think the departure of Patullo and the departure of A.J. Brown, both of them together, maybe Sirianni having his thumb off of the offense a little bit, a lot of this is all leading towards a lot more positivity and a lot better energy than what we have seen in prior training camps.
One thing I will say too, like as much as the outside of that building talks a lot about Sirianni and how he may be goofy, he doesn't call offensive plays, so like he really can't be the great head coach that people hope he is. Inside the building, they love him. Like, let's be real. He got a contract extension. Saquon talks highly of him. Jalen has talked more highly of Sirianni this year than he has, probably the previous 4 years combined already. So like, and remember BG said it, what was it, 3 years ago? He's like, when Sirianni was just not, like, he was trying to be more buttoned up, and he told him, like, be you. We need you to be you. And that's exactly what's happening. Like, Nick Sirianni just needs to be him. And if he's him, like, everything will fall into place. He is the leader of the Philadelphia Eagles, and at the head coach position. And look, we get it. Sean Mannion is the offensive coordinator, and things could get interesting in a year, or if or in 6 months, 7 months, say the Eagles offense explodes and there's a team out there that wants to hire him, then that'll be an interesting conversation, because that would be another offensive coordinator that could potentially go. Now, I don't know if it'll happen because this is the first year that Mannion is calling plays. But if what a lot of the offensive players have been saying about him is true, like, I wouldn't be surprised if this offense, they score four more points than they did last year. And I'm hoping, and I think because he has that quarterback background, the one thing I always talked about last year when it came to Kevin Patullo is he didn't call one play to set up another play, and it felt like he waited until he saw the result of the play on first down to call a play on second down, instead of, you need to think 2, 3, 4 plays ahead. And that's something that I think Sean Mannion will do, because he's played quarterback. Was he a starting quarterback? No, but he's been in the quarterback room. He's been on the field, and working under the likes of Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur and Sean Sean McVay, like just working with those guys, I think that's going to help him out a lot. And I think that that's going to make Jalen a better quarterback. And it's going to make things interesting too, because this is the last year of Jalen having guaranteed money on his contract. And he hasn't been bickering about, look, I want a new contract, this, that, and the third. And Jalen doesn't seem like that type of guy. He's just going to let let it fall where it falls. And if he gets a contract, he gets a contract. And it wouldn't shock me if he does. And, maybe Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are waiting to just see how he does. Say the first 6-7 weeks of the season, like he's picked up on this offense. This offense is rolling, and the Eagles are 6-2. It wouldn't shock me if he got a contract extension midway through the year. But I don't think he's allowing that, not having that, affect his preparation. And he seems to be the same guy that he's always been, except much more like cordial, much more happier. He mentioned his wife in a press conference yesterday when he got asked about, Jalen Carter's contract. And he's like, yeah, my wife put a $5 bill in my backpack. It's, talking about how it's an inside joke between them two. Like, he seems more open. And you mentioned, meeting up with receivers. He had them down in Houston. Everybody, like he had Andy Dalton, had Tanner McKee, had Eli Stowers, who we'll talk about him in a little bit. I'm a little worried we haven't heard much about him. He had Hollywood Brown, Dontavian Wicks, Elijah Moore, Devontae Smith. He's working with everybody. And then you see videos of Saquon Barkley and Cooper DeJean working together, along with Elijah Moore. Like, these guys weren't just sitting on their hands in the offseason. They've been putting in the work. And you love to see it, especially for a team that, definitely didn't meet expectations last year. And there's a bullseye on them in the NFC East. And a lot of people think that they're going to take a step back just because they lost. And look, losing A.J. Brown is huge because A.J. Brown is a legit number one receiver. But like they think Jalen's on the hot seat. They think Sirianni's on the hot seat. There's a lot to going into the season where people just think this team can't do it. But I don't agree with that. I think that Eagles have an opportunity, like keeping that mindset that they always do, and with Sirianni leading the way, that they have a chance to make some noise once again in the NFC.
Yeah, this is definitely a focused, buttoned up, and well built team. I think it's become quite clear in what we saw throughout the offseason, how, despite some of the media attention, things stayed very silent. Like you say, no news is good news. Nothing really came of it. A.J. Brown was very professional through the whole process. Even when he departed, he really had no ill will towards the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles spoke highly of him in his departure. You don't often see this, especially from divas like at the wide receiver position. And while we may not have liked the approach that AJ Brown took at times last season in kind of trying to push his way out of the building, I do still agree with what AJ Brown said. And now you can look back with hindsight and say AJ Brown was 100% correct. It's just when he wasn't being heard the way he wanted to be heard, he started to do things you definitely shouldn't do. Just because you don't like the offense, just because you're not hitting your 15 targets a game, you're closer to like 10 or 8, doesn't mean that you just give up when the ball is going to you or when something is happening that is in your general direction. So at the end of the day, through it all, despite what, us being the number one story on Get Up pretty much every single day of the offseason, the Philadelphia media doing the Philadelphia media type things, this team has stayed very well buttoned up. And I mean, I think this speaks volumes to Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie and the culture that exists, the culture that's built, and how this organization continues to be run just so well. And you mentioned Sean Mannion there. I think, if we kind of jumped out ahead of teams, other people wanted to see what his continued succession would look like, where we jumped out in front of teams. If he has really great success this year, no, I don't think anyone's going to be very surprised, because so many former players, so many former coaches who worked with him as a player or who worked with him on a coaching staff spoke so highly and said, maybe it's a little early, but people are going to see him for what he is. And obviously, Jordan Mailata, the evil genius comments that he makes and stuff, clearly, there could be serious questions if this offense does take off. And what do you do with Nick Sirianni and Sean Mannion? Do you let, Sean Mannion very well could be one of those long tenured guys who calls plays, who you can trust, who can run the offense for you for, years, decades, potentially. Do you let a guy like that get out of the building when you butted the line to get him into the building in the first place and let him get his first chance at being a play caller? It'll be really interesting to see, but obviously we're not going to get way ahead of ourselves in that. And after seeing John Harbaugh and him trying to hype up the New York Giants in that, I'm okay with Nick Sirianni being weird and Nick Sirianni being Nick Sirianni, because there was not a piece of me that got motivated, and there is not a piece of me that thinks many of those Giants were motivated by John Harbaugh's intro, video. Like, if I was the New York Giants, I wouldn't have shared that. That was not a moment to share for the New York Giants and their new head coach and the future direction.
The other coaches didn't even seem excited either. That was pretty bad. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball, it is nice to see Tank Bigsby getting a lot of touches in camp, and I expect in this offense that he's going to get more, work with Saquon. And look, Saquon's still going to be the lead back, and if Saquon's churning and burning and making plays, he'll stay on the field. But it doesn't hurt to give him, a drive here and there off and let Tank Bigsby go. Bigsby was really good last year when he had the opportunity, and obviously you expound on the amount of touches that he had, his yards per carry and whatnot will come down, but he was still a big play waiting to happen. So I think our running back duo of Saquon Barkley and Tank Bigsby is going to be really good, and I think that's going to include the passing game. I mean, I know Jalen's not too fond of throwing the ball to the running backs, but that's going to be involved in this offense. And then a lot of people were talking about Mekhi Lemon and how he is the quote-unquote replacement of A.J. Brown. Look, he's not the replacement of A.J. Brown. The Eagles technically don't have a replacement for A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is a unique specimen. We know Devontae is going to be the number one. He's different than A.J. Brown. Elijah Moore is different than A.J. Brown. Hollywood Brown, different than A.J. Brown. Dontavian Wicks probably might be the most similar, but he's still different than A.J. Brown. And Mekhi Lemon is definitely different than A.J. Brown. They don't have the A.J. Brown replacement, on the roster, and they might not even need it. The Eagles in previous years have been able to out-talent teams to get open, to get the ball down the field. This year, they might out-scheme teams to get open, to get down the field, to put the ball in the end zone, which is going to be a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. You don't need the AJ Brown replacement if the scheme is what's going to get you open. If they're going to use your specific talent, Hollywood Brown's speed, Dontavian Wicks' ability to go up and get a ball, the 50-50 catches, Devontae Smith and his overall capabilities of being a wide receiver one. Eli Stowers, you kind of spoke to him, but if he becomes the talent, the freak athlete talent mismatch in the early middle part of the field that he's supposed to be, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, just think about these guys and their scheme versatility and the capabilities that they can have if they're schemed open and given the opportunity to get open that way. You don't need to have a guy to replace the 20 to 150 targets that AJ Brown had. You can take that and disperse it among 4 or 5 different guys and still have your Devontae Smith go for 130 to 150 targets and do his thing. It's really going to be interesting to see, and I expect bumps in the road with this scheme and with this offense once it starts getting rolled out in actual games, because obviously it's bound to happen. It always happens. It's a brand new scheme. There's some confusion. There's some things that don't go the way you want it to go right away. But I expect within 3 or 4 weeks for this offense to get buttoned down and us to really see it ticking along the way that we all hope and have planned it to go, with Sean Mannion coming from a McVay and a Shanahan and a McConnell tree. So I'm really excited, but I'm not going way over the top and saying, it's going to click from day one, because we know from week one and two are essentially the preseason for the starters. Because I still don't think, despite that it's a whole brand new scheme, that we're going to see the starters much, if at all, during the preseason. And even if we do, we're obviously not going to see the Sean Mannion scheme at its peak that we're going to see it at throughout the season, because you want it to be vanilla and you don't want to really try and give anything away. Your comment on Tank Bigsby was spot on. There's so much talent, and I mean, I think, what is he? He's only like 23 years old. Like, he's still super young, and he's a guy who could take could get an extension this offseason from the Philadelphia Eagles to continue to be the RB2. There's a lot of money tied up in Saquon Barkley, and you don't want him to be your lead back with 350 touches every single season as he's headed towards 30 years old. If you can spread the load and both of them can be equally efficient, Saquon Barkley obviously still carrying, maybe the 60 load, and Tank Bigsby and others carrying the 40% load. I mean, you have a very reliable and very strong backfield, and it doesn't say anything bad about Saquon Barkley. It just says, we want to keep you healthy, because we know a healthy Saquon Barkley is going to help us more later in the season and in a long playoff run than a Saquon Barkley controlling 90% of the backfield.
And
so that's
Saquon probably only has 2 to 3 years left. He's 28, 29 or something like that. Like, he doesn't have much left. And again, Bigsby being 23, he could potentially be part of a running back duo beyond Saquon. He's going to want to try to get a payday too, but I think this is the last year of his contract. And then my last point on the offensive side of the ball is the offensive line. They need to stay healthy. If the offensive line stays healthy, the Eagles can go wherever they want to go. They need to continue to build that depth on the offensive line. We know Fred Johnson's going to be here. We expect Markel Bell to be here. Maybe Willie Lampkin, who knows? Maybe Drew Kendall, Jake Majors. Just off the top of my head, I can't really think right now, but like, there are a bunch of guys that they're gonna have to prove it. Like, and I'm expecting Lane Johnson to stay healthy this year. I'm expecting a bounce back year from Landon Dickerson. I'm expecting a bounce back year from Cam Jurgens. Ross Tucker said he had a similar injury to Cam Jurgens, that back injury. And he said that first year back, he was not good, but that second year back was a world of difference. He felt like a totally new man. So that's what I anticipate from Cam Jurgens this year. And obviously, I think Jordan Mailata is going to have a better year than he had last year. I mean, he would even say it himself. He took a step back last year. He wasn't even rated the number one player in all the NFL in 2024. And, last year, he didn't have a good year. And injuries, and having the injuries to Landon Dickerson and then having some injuries to himself didn't help. So I do expect that the offensive line to improve, and obviously not having Stoutland is big, but I've heard nothing but complimentary things about Chris Cooper. And he knows the scheme, he knows the system, so he can learn from the Lane Johnsons and the Jordan Mailatas, but they can also learn from him and get things going. And again, as I mentioned before, this is a different blocking scheme. You're not going to have a lot of time where you're going to be one-on-one with those big-time defensive ends, the Myles Garretts and whatnot on the outside. So, it should be, and this is where it's going to be up to Jalen, should be get the ball, read the field, get rid of it. Get the snap, read the field, get rid of it, and that will help the offensive line. And hopefully we just see an offense that's in the 21st century.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think, when thinking about like training camp battles, obviously the main one on the offensive side of the ball is QB2, which I think is obviously a clear runaway win for Tanner McKee. I think Andy Dalton is past his prime. The only reason you would keep...
I don't know about that. I think Andy Dalton QB2.
I would hate to see, unless Tanner McKee's traded, if you expose Tanner McKee to waivers, Tanner McKee's not going to be back on this roster. I have certainty he won't be.
I'm not saying it's going to be Dalton. I think Dalton has a legit chance. I didn't think that when they traded for him, but I think that now. I think he has a legit chance to be QB2. I think the three quarterbacks on the roster are going to be Hurts, obviously, Dalton, and McKee. I don't think McKee gets traded, but Atlanta has both their quarterbacks, Tua and Michael Penix hurt, so you never know there. But I do think that Cole Panton will be the one that gets released. I don't think anybody will pick him up. They'll bring him back on the practice squad. But like as of right now, unless there's an injury to a starting quarterback across the league, it's going to be Hurts, Dalton, and McKee. The Dalton and McKee, who's 2, who's 3. That'll be interchanged, I think, throughout the year. But I do think Andy Dalton has a legit chance right now to be QB2.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all reports from Camper that they're splitting the QB2 right down the middle, which is absolutely fair. It makes the most sense. McKee's been here for a while. He deserves a shot. Dalton, you traded for him. There's a bit of money there, not very much, but there's a little bit of money. It's a very cheap backup, but Dalton hasn't been very good with regards to what the media has said. Cole Payton, like you said, Cole Payton was obviously always going to be, a developmental project. And obviously he had a really bad day today. I think they said, I saw something like he threw 3 interceptions. He's not looking great. He's not looking the part so far, but obviously he was going to be a major developmental project. You weren't bringing him in with any expectation of him it would have been a pleasant surprise, but of him actually making your 53-man roster and having to carry him through that route. I don't think that was ever the plan. But from a offensive line standpoint, I agree. I think the change, if there was a time that for this Stoutland stuff to happen, a completely new scheme seems like the perfect time for him to have his departure from Philadelphia. You can see a different scheme. You can put the different scheme into place. Jeff Stoutland was a great developer. Are they going to be able to develop some of these guys to the same degree that Jeff Stoutland was able to? I don't know. Only time will tell on that front, but I think a lot of the main offensive positional battles that I'm watching are the depth of this offensive line. They have a ton of guys, and it'll be really interesting to see who they keep, who has the versatility that they want to keep. Do they value versatility the same way that Jeff Stoutland did? Because Jeff Stoutland valued the versatility of being able to move people across the offensive line, especially his depth options and having that swing tackle, having that interior offensive lineman who played 2 or 3 of the interior positions. But does the Sean Mannion offense value it to the same degree? Maybe not. Maybe our evaluation of this offensive line and other people's evaluations of this offensive line may be completely off because we're still thinking in the mindset of Jeff Stoutland and in the mindset of the previous way that this offensive line was run. So I'll be interested to see there and the QB2, that battle. You voiced your concerns about Eli Stowers earlier. I guess we haven't heard a ton from Mekhi Lemon. I know that he's just back from injury as well, which probably has kept him a little quieter as he's getting up to speed. But we haven't heard a ton from any of the rookies really beyond, I think Markel Bell is the one I've seen the most about because it looks like he's practicing to take over the swing tackle position and he's second in line to Lane Johnson. So it looks like they're cross-training him while at the same time kind of focusing him in on being the primary second right tackle off the bench if anything happens to Lane Johnson. But outside that, I haven't really heard much from the rookie class. So I'm not overly worried yet for Stowers, but I could get more concerned if we're getting further into training camp and all we're seeing him is him working the pads and in blocking drills and not making any plays out on the field or not being involved much with the primary offense.
And it seems that they had Miles Hinton at guard the other I think it was yesterday potentially. So remember they drafted him as a tackle out of Michigan, and in that speaking of versatility right there, if he could play guard, he could potentially be guard, tackle, play all across the offensive line minus center. So that's good for him. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball first. I'm remiss that we didn't start with this, but Jalen Carter getting the big extension, 4 years, 152 million dollars, which can go up to 160 million. The highest paid interior defensive lineman or interior defensive lineman in NFL history. A lot of people were worried that this wouldn't get done. There was a lot of talk about him potentially getting traded because they didn't they just didn't feel, they felt his character concerns were an issue. Nobody ever knows what Howie Roseman's going to do. Howie talked about how he's been nothing but a good steward here. Obviously, he had the spitting incident with Dak But like he comes in, who doesn't want to spit on Dak or Cowboy? Like, let's be real. He comes in, he puts his head down, he gets to work. Obviously, if he doesn't sack Matt Stafford in the wild card round last year or 2 years ago, the Eagles don't go to the Super Bowl and win potentially. So like he is obviously a key. He has the opportunity to be one of the best players in Eagles history on the defensive side of football. And we're talking about guys like Reggie White. We're talking about guys like Brian Dawkins, Seth Joyner. Like we're talking about legit guys, legit dudes out there. And he is a legit dude. The Eagles are giving him $38 million a year. They're giving Jordan Davis $26 million a year. Jonathan Gennard $25 million a year. That doesn't speak. Mauro Jomo, you think that this might be his last year with the Eagles, even though Vic Fangio did say today hopefully he hopes Howie saved that money for him. You would think Jalen Hunt's going to get a contract. Nolan Smith might be on his way out. Remember, was it 2 years ago? Last year, the Eagles had the most expensive offense in the history of the NFL. Their defense was being paid like 30th, 31st in the NFL. That's going to switch. We got Davis, Grenard, and Carter. Who's got to get paid next, right? Quinyon, Cooper. And who knows how Reek Woolen's going to play, and if Reek like really fits into this defense, and Vic Fangio like goes to Howie like, dude, I want him back. We got to bring him back. Like you got to try to bring him back. So the Eagles are going to start switching that money from the offensive side, which is where this is why Saquon potentially might not be back in a year or two. If Lane Johnson retires, that would help the Eagles, obviously. Like, this is where we're going to see that switch. And the Eagles, who have hit on the defensive side of the football for the most part in the draft, we're going to have to start hitting on the offensive side of the football. And that's why they went with Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers in the first 2 rounds this past draft.
Yeah, no, and you're 100% right. We're going to see a major shift, and we're going to see, the offensive side of the ball become one of the cheaper offenses in the league. It's just a reality of how it's going to work when the pendulum swings from spending all this money and having an offense that goes out and wins the Super Bowl to having a really young offense to help buoy you in getting to those Super Bowls and to winning those Super Bowls as well. There's got to be that major shift. And like you said, the talent, the home runs that Howie has hit with guys like Jalen Hunt, who by all instances, so far in reporting from training camp is that he's getting after Jalen Hurts. He's given the offensive line a very tough time. Obviously, they're not really in pads, so it's very difficult to fully gauge that, or they're in light pads, light running, light action altogether. So it's tough to fully gauge it, but Jalen Hunt was starting to come out of it, break out a bit more at the end of the season, definitely more than Nolan Smith was, especially when with the arrival of the Miami Dolphin. There's name slipping my mind. Jalen Phillips, yes, especially after Jalen Phillips arrived, like you could tell that there was pressure off of Hunt, and he could continue to develop and up his performance and get better with the help and support and guidance of, a veteran presence like Jalen Phillips. And now having Grenard in the building, I think it was vital. That was one of the key things, was like Jalen Hunt, Nolan Smith on each side aren't going to do it. But having that veteran presence is going to elevate both of them, and you probably are going to get the best out of one of them, and that's one that you're going to pick to extend. The Jalen Carter extension, and I think the comment was made, I don't know if it was Howie or Sirianni who said it, but they did say they're not paying for what they've gotten from him. They're paying for what they know they're going to get from him. And that's the big thing. And there's the Eagles fans who probably feel, well, Jalen Carter's been underpaid. The stats speak for themselves. A lot of the underlying stats, if you go by on a per snap basis, he is top 3 in a large number of categories, included like batted balls, pressures per snap, etc. Like those really deeply dug stats, he's at the top of his game. And this doesn't include that you can go back in most games and find, you can count on minimum one hand occurrences where he was held or hauled down to the ground, where penalties should have been called, but they didn't get called. So the amount of more damage that he can do if he starts getting the respect of referees and refs start catching players trying to go after him. And, a contract extension might help in this case, because contract extensions tend to get the eyes of people on you more, especially when you're getting paid to the degree that Jalen Carter's getting paid. The character things, whatever, it is what it is. At the end of the day, we did not trade up for Jalen Carter with the mindset of we're going to trade him away or we're not going to extend him. I think that it was always going to end up being a debate of what happens if they went into the season and he didn't have his extension, and what if Vic Fangio left? What were you going to do? Because now, I kind of tweeted about it earlier, if Fangio is going to be around a couple more years, go ahead and extend Ajomo. Ajomo doesn't make sense to extend if you don't have Fangio's word that he's going to be around a little longer, because paying big money for 3 interior defensive linemen just doesn't work if potentially you're going to Schwartz, who has a 4-3 scheme, if Fangio departs. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But for now, you have 2 absolute monsters in Carter and Davis who are getting paid what they deserve for what they brought to the team and what they are going to bring to the team in the future.
Definitely agree with that, and it's good having those Georgia Bulldogs in the middle. And obviously, I think the biggest position battle on defense is going to be safety. Right now, we know that Coop is going to be one of the safeties. McCoop will be the other in base defense. And then when they go to nickel, Epps right now, but Michael Carter is also in the picture. That's when Coop's going to go to the nickel back, and he's the best nickel corner in all of football. And they're not going to be in base a lot. Let's be honest. They're going to be in nickel most of the time. So that second safety that's going to play next to McCoop is going to be big. I still think that second safety is not on the roster. I still think that there's the potential. And I know a lot of people were thinking the Eagles could trade for Grant Delpit. That's not going to happen now. He got the big contract from the Browns. But I do think that there's somebody that's on a roster right now that will be with the Eagles and potentially starting on September 13th against Washington next to Makuba. So it'll be interesting to see how he does there. We know he likes to make, big moves, during camp. And he hasn't made one yet. So we're probably going to see one soon, maybe. At linebacker, Jahad Campbell switched to number 11. It's going to be him and Ball. And this could potentially, again, talking about the salary cap, even though I still think it's fake. And a lot the money that's being allocated. It wouldn't shock me if this is Zach Bond's last year with the Eagles. So he's going to want to go out and ball and show that he can still be a productive linebacker, so that the Eagles potentially keep him, or if he were to get cut, he can go somewhere else and play. But we know Jahad Campbell is the future at the linebacker position. Like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. can also play. We went through a lot of years when we talked about the linebacker position for the Eagles, and there were nobody that can play. And we're talking about a team that didn't re-sign Nakobe Dean, who was really good. They drafted Jahad Campbell in the first round last year. They have Zach Bond. They have Jeremiah Trotter Jr. They like Smile London. So it's crazy the amount of bodies, and we always talk about it's usually quantity and then not quality. Well, they have a lot of quantity and quality at the cornerback position, at the linebacker position, at the defensive line, edge position. It's crazy. We didn't even mention AJ Epinesa, who I think he's going to make the team. I think he's going to be somebody that's going to be part of that rotation. It's amazing how good this defense legit has a chance to be number 1 in the league again. Obviously, you got the Seahawks, you got the Texans, you got the Broncos. There's a bunch of good defenses out there. But the Eagles, at worst, are going to be a top 5 defense this year in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the starters are consistent. They're continuing to develop. For the most part, I think it's pretty much the majority of the entire starting defense from last year returning, minus obviously Reed Blankenship, who we've talked about, and Nakobe Dean, and we talked about that on occasion about Reed Blankenship. He was replaceable depending on the amount that he got paid. Nakobe Dean was really good. He was going to be someone, but when Jahad Campbell was drafted, you kind of knew, you kind of had the inkling that, they were preparing for life after Nakobe Dean with that move. And Jahad Campbell, I think, can be as good, if not better, than Nakobe Dean, because Jahad Campbell is very good in coverage. He's a strong coverage linebacker. Nakobe Dean was, in my opinion, more average. But what Nakobe Dean brought as a blitzer was a game changer when Vic Fangio was able to send him after the quarterback. The havoc that he created along that defensive line with the mammoths that were already down there moving bodies on the defensive line. is something that is really irreplaceable. And I guess you kind of hope that the replacements there with a guy like Chance Campbell, maybe, or Deontay Lawson, if they see if they really like Lawson, and they let, maybe if he has the ability to become a blitzer, it would probably just be that person will be more situational versus when Nakobe Dean was pretty much out there all the time, pushing Jahad Campbell out to the edge. But it's nice to see that Jahad Campbell experiment at edge is done, and he's going to move into that inside linebacker position. And I think that he creates a major disadvantage over the middle of the field for, lesser than athletic tight ends and running backs who are hoping to catch a ball in that area, because he was amazing in coverage last season when he was put at inside linebacker or was able to drop back into coverage from wherever he was. But I agree with you. We've replaced 2 starters, and then you've brought in a lot of guys with upside. I agree with you. I think AJ Epinesa makes the roster. The upside is there. He had amazing talent coming out of college. It's just injuries kind of got in his way and kind of ended his tenure in Buffalo a little early. But that doesn't mean that he can't get things back in a rotational role or find a way to be an extremely valuable rotational outside linebacker / edge rusher, whatever you want to call him in the Vic Fangio scheme. But I think that he can have great value there. And Jeremiah Trotter was having an amazing mandatory mini camp, and his name was constantly in the media's mouths and in the media's writing. So what more can come from a guy like Jeremiah Trotter? There's some really good depth, and not often do you get the chance to return 9 of your 11 starters. And even more so, Jalen Carter missed a lot of time at the end of the season. Makuba missed a lot of time at the end of the season. No thanks to Sidney Brown. So having those guys back, like Nolan Smith missed a bunch of time. So having these guys back and hopefully fully healthy and not missing much time will be huge for this team. And we saw an emergence of Byron Young. So while all the depth may not be perfect, there is some really solid depth behind these starters as well. And depth and versatility, as we know, is extremely important in the Vic Fangio scheme. So I agree with you. I think that this defense can absolutely finish top 5 and rival some of those top defenses that you named earlier.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them out there on the field. I think the big, you mentioned how we're not going to see much in preseason for the Eagles offensively, in games, but they're going to be going to New England in 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to AJ Brown going up against Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Reek Woolen, and seeing how the Eagles do against the AFC champion New England Patriots. But yeah, I'm so intrigued with what this team can do. There were a lot of people that were talking about how it was there wasn't a lot of excitement for Eagles football. There's always excitement for Eagles football, and I cannot wait. I've been waiting since the end of the season for this new season to get here, after the draft, after free agency, after the OTAs and whatnot, and I'm just happy that we're 16 days away from the first preseason game, 45 days away from the first regular season game. The first, the Hall of Fame game's a week from tonight. I don't care that it's the Cardinals and the Panthers. I'll be watching. There's going to be football on TV. I'm hyped, and I can't wait to watch, this sport, get back into, just get back on our TVs.
Yeah, having MLB as the only sport to watch, this has to be one of the biggest, as everything wrapped up and then the real lull of the NFL offseason started, and then you're stuck with just baseball. It's tough. It is a long haul to get through. It feels like a long haul, but really it's only 6 weeks, but it's still 6 weeks is 6 weeks. And it is a very, very long haul for us who just enjoy the rush of the NFL and football. It doesn't really matter if the Eagles are playing. Obviously, we're Eagles focused. Eagles are our primary love, but just having football back on TV, even if it's the backups for Carolina and Arizona, it doesn't matter to me. It's just so good to have football back, training camp to talk about and report on, seeing pictures, seeing videos of Jalen Hurts throwing the football and players making plays. It just gets you really excited. And I feel like every year when we do these like training camp reaction episodes and watching preseason games, we just get so hyped, so overhyped for this Philadelphia Eagles team. But at the end of the day, while they may have underperformed last year, they still performed obviously better than over half of the league. We have
11 games with a terrible offensive coordinator.
I know it was unbelievable that they will win 11 games. I know that they were ending up putting up like 21 points, averaged like 21 points a game, and they were being completely lifted by the defense. But this year, it's going to be completely different. You have the same defense that can continue to do heavy lifting like that, but you have an offense that, in theory, should put up obviously a lot more. I'm hoping that they're bordering on 30 points per game, and I would be obviously I'll be ecstatic if that's the outcome. Getting up to 30 points a game is hard. It puts you among the elite offenses in the league, but I'd love to get there. I'd love to get to 26 or 27 points per game, because last season was just so painful and excruciating to watch from an offensive perspective, and the dysfunction that came, but the fact that the team stayed together, and the reason we underperformed was largely in part due to the ineptness of our offensive coordinator, gives you reason to not buy the media narrative that's out there and get excited for this Philadelphia Eagles team. Yes, you're not going to replace A.J. Brown. We talked about it earlier in the episode, but do you need to replace A.J. Brown in this scheme? Does A.J. Brown fit this scheme? Probably not. It's a unique scheme. It's different. It's going to use more than just 2 or 3 main targets like
AJ
Devontae Smith.
Scheme, to be honest.
Yeah, of course. I'm being a little over the top, but like, you don't need to focus your offense in on Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and Saquon Barkley anymore. The uniqueness of the scheme should, in theory, look like, the San Francisco 49ers, who can always be next man up as far as a wide receiver and a running back go, it seems. The capabilities, the Minnesota Vikings, and the ability that they've been able to, they unlocked a guy like Jalen Naylor and got him to go out and get paid by the Vegas Raiders. Got Oakland. So, I mean, there's reason to get excited and to be excited, if only for the fact that Patullo is gone and we are going to see a completely different offense. That, to me, is enough to get me excited and to get me believing. Obviously, we're going to be competitive. Obviously, I see us as a playoff team. How far can we get? How successful can this offense be? And can this defense really repeat to the same degree as last year? If all of those things click, then we can make a deep run.
So my question is, we obviously want to see the new offense. Week 1 goes into midway through the third quarter, and Eagles have 6 points, and offense isn't looking good. Do they revert back to what Jalen's comfortable with, or do they still continue to work on this, trying to perfect this Sean Mannion offense?
Like I said, the first 2 to 3 weeks for me is like a preseason for the starters. I absolutely think you give it time and you work through those kinks and you don't revert back. We've seen a...
Okay, make it week 4. Make it week 4 then. Make it week 4.
I think you brought Sean Mannion in to exclusively put in a new offense. I don't think there's a reverting back this season. I think you work through it, you push through it, and you try to get the most out of this offense and see what you got. You invested in Sean Mannion, you let him bring in his guys. Jalen Hurts is bought in, the offense is bought in. You continue to push. You won't have... In theory, you won't have a guy like A.J. Brown who's just throwing games away for you because he's not being heard or he's not being listened to. Now, get to week 6, get to week 7, and there's some noise again. There's some players voicing discontent. There's some giving up. Maybe we have a discussion, but I think you have to give this time and you have to let this offense work out the kinks that are inevitably going to be there, especially in the early part of the season.
I agree with that. And without knowing how the season ended, didn't we think the same thing when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator and he tried to do things his way? We got to week 4, we got to the bye week, and they were like, nah, we're going to run the ball. And obviously, we didn't know week 4, week 5, whatever, that we were going to go on a run that we went on to go win the Super Bowl. But you think that this will be different, even though we didn't allow an experienced offensive coordinator like Kellen Moore to continue to run his offense, but we'll allow Sean Mannion, who's never done it before, to continue to run his offense? I'm just playing devil's advocate.
That definitely, I agree. I mean, you got in theory, you had Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman essentially run this offensive coordinator hiring process. You got Nick Sirianni's thumb off of over the offense. I think you have to let it run its course. You have to see what you got. You have to make things happen with it. And like this is where the media is drawing the idea that, maybe this could be the last season of Jalen Hurts if things don't work out, but the offense in theory should look better. Everyone's operating right, but the only thing is Jalen Hurts isn't operating and he's not comfortable. That's where those stories are coming from. And that's where the mindset's coming from for some people, that this could be Jalen Hurts' last season, because like how many more years can you go on with just this really vanilla offense that leans almost exclusively or largely on running the ball? But the good thing about this offense, if it is Shanahan-like, McVay-like, is that there's going to be the balance between running the ball, passing the football, but it does get into some uncomfortable places for Jalen Hurts. So hopefully Jalen Hurts is working through those uncomfortable places now. I mean, you're watching training camp, you're seeing it. He's throwing over the middle. He's making the plays. He obviously throwing over the middle. He's not going to go 100 for 100 at any point in the season through the field. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be probably interceptions over the middle. There's going to be maybe underthrown balls over the middle. That just happens. It doesn't even Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, some of the best quarterbacks in the league make those mistakes and have those issues. So in theory, expect that everything's going to change overnight and be perfect overnight, or that Jalen Hurts is going to be able to run this offense perfectly and make every play perfectly would just be an unrealistic expectation to have for this offense. But I think that, based on how everything went and Jeff Stoutland being out of the picture, just based on how everything went down and Sirianni didn't really get to pick his next guy up. It was Roseman and Lurie that picked the next man up. I think this offense is going to get a very, very long leash. And I think it rightfully deserves to have a long leash, because you have to make a big decision on Jalen Hurts and the contract extension next offseason. While he's not saying it, it's going to come up. When the guaranteed money's gone, the extension talk starts, and he's not going to be the guy to air his grievances out like Baker Mayfield to the media necessarily, but he's going to be a guy that behind closed doors and with his agent, he's going to want that contract extension. So I think it's going to be a long leash that this offense gets and that Sean Mannion gets. And the Eagles didn't butt the line with Sean Mannion because they didn't believe in Sean Mannion.
I agree with that. It'll be a fun conversation to have throughout the rest of camp and throughout preseason, as we're a month and a half away from the first game of the regular season. Obviously cannot wait. We're going to be back to weekly shows now, and then once the regular season starts, we'll be back to twice a week shows. I'm looking forward to that as well. It's going to be good to talk Eagles football once again. I cannot wait, Connor. I'm looking forward to it. Vacations are done, sort of, probably, for the most part. But yes, I cannot wait until we get to talk and preview and react to the first preseason game in 16 days against the Baltimore Ravens, where we're going to see a lot of probably Andy Dalton and Cole Payton. Definitely won't see any of the starters. We'll see Damian Pierce and Will Shipley, see Darius Cooper and whoever else we got at receiver. But yeah, I can't wait till we start seeing games on the TV. Like I mentioned, we'll be back next week. We'll give more reaction to what's happened over the next about week or so of training camp practices. Anything you wanted to say, Connor, before we finish off?
No, it's just great to have, the smell of pigskin in the air and football back. I can't wait. And it's just wild that we finally made it. We're here 16 days away from the first preseason game, just over 40 days away from the game week 1 matchup with the Washington Commanders. We made it. We're here, and NFL is back.
Yep, we have, like I said, plenty of shows, and we're going to have our season prediction show, which will be like, we're going to pick all the divisions and whatnot and give our Super Bowl matchups. We'll do our roster projections. So we have plenty of stuff on tap for you over the next month and a half before we hit the regular season. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LGRL54. Follow the Eagle Spin Pool Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.